Hello, everyone. Welcome. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us for the Crucible's Virtual Artist Talk. My name is Alyssa Stone. I am the Director of Programs at the Crucible, and we are so excited that you are joining us for our second installment of our Virtual Artist Talks featuring the incredible jewelry and metalsmith artist Karen Smith. We are so glad that you're here today. I'm assuming that you all know a little bit about the Crucible, but just in case you don't, since 1999, the Crucible has been an important cultural arts organization and community in the Bay Area. We serve more than 5,000 students a year, work with over 45 local schools offering classes, workshops, and site visits, and have the pleasure of introducing so many students to the transformative power and confidence-building experience of making art. Over 20,000 people each year interact with our classes and programs, with 64% of young people we serve receiving financial aid to participate. For many, the Crucible is the industrial arts school in the Bay Area, known for high-quality teaching and a vibrant artist community. However, since COVID-19 erupted in our area, the Crucible has had to cancel or postpone more than 236 classes and programs. We are working hard to bring some of the magic of the Crucible online, including this talk today. We are sad to be closed, but we're excited to be connecting with our community in new ways and getting to sit down with Karen Smith, our artist today. We have a matching campaign happening right now with the Crucible. Every dollar that is donated is doubled through May 8th, up to $50,000. We are so grateful to an anonymous donor who is helping us meet this match. So visit our website, thecrucible.org, that's thecrucible.org, and check out more about our organization. And if you're able, donate now all the way through May 8th, and your money will be doubled to help us meet our match and continue to thrive throughout this situation. This is the second week of our Virtual Artist Talk series, so stay tuned at the end for our announcement about who our next featured artist is going to be as we continue these Virtual Artist Talks every Friday at 3 p.m. We encourage you throughout the talk to send questions that you have for Karen Smith to us in the chat function on your screen. We are going to ask that all of our guests stay muted today, but you are welcome to send us messages through the chat. We love it when you say hello and let us know where you're listening from. So pop over into the chat and give us a quick hello and tell us where you're listening or watching from, and feel free to add some questions that you'd like to ask of Karen. We're going to have two different parts where we'll ask Q&A from the audience that I will read out loud. So if you add a question into the chat box, we'll go ahead and read that for you. A little bit about our featured artist today. Karen Smith is an Oakland-based, self-taught metal artist who specializes in jewelry and small sculpture, typically working in sterling and fine silver and white and yellow gold. Karen is a faculty member in the Crucible's jewelry department and displays her work in shows around the Bay Area. She recently spent an extended period of time studying with a master goldsmith in Dakar, Senegal, a place where female metalsmiths do not usually practice. This inspired Karen's 2019 launch of We Wield The Hammer, a program designed to educate and support women of African descent in metalworking. Karen has a show coming up on Saturday, April 25th at 1 p.m. virtually. Follow Karen on Facebook and Instagram and sign up for her mailing list on her website, karensmithmetalartist.com, and we'll go ahead and we'll add that into the chat for you to click on. That's karensmithmetalartist.com, so that you can sign up for her mailing list and stay up to date on all the incredible things and shows that Karen has throughout the Bay Area and all year round. I am so excited to introduce Karen, so please join me in a warm virtual welcome to Karen Smith.
Hi.
Karen, we are so excited to have you as our featured artist for our Virtual Artist Talk today. I am excited because one of Karen's signature things is her vibrant lipstick. So I put on my most vibrant lipstick today so that I could be just like Karen. So Karen, to help kick us off, Could you please tell us a little bit about how you first got involved in making metal jewelry and metalwork?
Thank you for such a warm welcome, first of all, and thank you for the lipstick. It's a way to brighten up the day, don't you think?
Yes, absolutely.
I actually got started in metalwork because I just had ideas that I wanted to see come to fruition. I used to do bead work. And I started making malas and other kinds of prayer beads. And then people would say, oh, you should make jewelry. And so I started making beaded jewelry, but like things would come to me that I didn't want to do with beads or that I couldn't do with beads. And so, I decided that I had to learn how to work with metal. And then I started slowly. I first learned to do wire wrapping, which is the simple art of using wire to create shapes and forms and things. And then my visions and my ideas got bigger, and I knew I had needed to learn how to set stones. I needed to learn how to solder and that kind of thing. And that's how it happened.
You've used some really fun and exciting jewelry terms. Could you tell us a little bit what you mean when you say solder? What does that mean for those of us who are not jewelry artists?
So soldering is the act of putting metal together. One of my students calls it melting. And I love that term actually, because what you do is use something and it melts and it connects them, it joins the metal together. So soldering is something that you do with fire and you do with metal to connect metal.
Thank you, Teacher Karen. Tell us about one of your first metalsmithing projects. How does it differ from the work that you do now?
So I love to tell the story about one of my first metalsmithing projects because I wanted to make a ring, and I had to learn how to set stones. And so, I sort of taught myself how to do it, and I finally got the stone set, and I was so happy. I finally got the bezel done, which is the piece of metal that goes around the stone, which holds it in. I finally got that bezel in, and I put the stone in, and I polished it up, and then I showed a friend of mine. I was like, look, I finally got it done. And he was like, but it's not attached to anything. So I was so excited to get it done that I never attached it to the ring, the actual ring shank, which is this part. And so the way that you fix that is to take the stone out and then solder the two pieces together and then put the stone back. And I just thought, nope, this is perfect. I finally got it. And it is a memento that I keep on my bench. And I like to tell that story, and I especially like to tell it to students because, because I'm self-taught, thinking about how I did that keeps me mindful of working out the steps. So I write down steps all the time because, if I had been trained, I never would have done that. Or the likelihood that I would have done that is, if I had been formally trained, the likelihood that I would have done that is pretty low. But, it's a proud moment for me, but it's a teaching moment for me. That is a reminder that I need to make sure I'm paying attention to the steps as they go.
You have such an interesting perspective around creative license and technique. What are your thoughts around art made from the heart and art made from the head?
I think art made from the heart and art made from the head is art. But I think that art made from the heart for me is actual art. Art made from the head is just production. And funny story, when my teacher in Senegal and I had a long conversation about inspiration, because I was telling him that I was inspired to make these mask earrings, and he was like, inspiration, what are you talking about? And he was like, you just make what the customer wants. And, And so I ended up thinking, I'm never going to make things that I don't want to make. I only want to make what I want to make. And I'm sure at one point in the conversation, he was thinking, who the hell cares about inspiration? Like, you just make to produce so that you can eat. And I think that there's space and room for all of that. And for the most part, I have been really, really fortunate that the majority of what I make from the heart. Since that conversation with him, though, I have made something based on what the customer wanted, and because I needed to eat. So I got it now in a visceral way. I think art from the heart is a privilege, and I also think it's a blessing. But I think it's all art. Like, however it comes through us is what's important.
Thank you for sharing. Let's talk a little bit about some of your specific pieces, which are absolutely stunning and just visually so incredible to see in person.
Thank you.
In your practice, you create wearable art. Can you give us an example of a piece of wearable art you have made and what it means to you?
So I'm actually wearing, if you can see that, I'm wearing the mask earrings that I first was inspired to make when I was in Dakar. And these are now some of my signature pieces. I get inspiration from all kinds of places, but mostly from places where there are glimpses of joy and where there are glimpses of light. And when I was in Senegal, the village that the shop was in, right across from us was a mask maker and seller. And there were just these extraordinary masks from all over West Africa that inspired me. And I just wanted to see them in metal form, in silver. And so I make them now in silver. And does that answer the question?
Yeah, we actually, I thought this was a really interesting part of a conversation we recently had about masks. You feature a lot of mask making in your artwork. Masks are cross-cultural. Every kind of culture has some form of mask art making.
Absolutely.
And it's a really interesting time right now to think about how masks will filter into the art of today, right? How will masks become part of our story when we think about them as filter masks. Anyway, I just thought that was really interesting that masks are so prevalent in your work and they're so prevalent across many cultures.
Well, I have to tell you, though, that I was inspired to make these masks not because I saw them and they were really beautiful, but for me, masks figure so prominently in my work because they really are about self-expression. Sometimes they're about cultural expression. Sometimes they're about spiritual expression. Sometimes they're about emotional expression. But masks figure so prominently in the work because for me, it's about the visage. It's like, my mother used to say, fix your face. Straighten up your face, because I'm a Capricorn and whatever I'm thinking, you can see it on my face. And that's been a theme throughout my life. And so that's how masks are showing up in the work and have been over the last couple of years also. I think you're absolutely right. Like in the middle of this pandemic, masks are even more prominent in the forefront of people's imagination. And I wonder what that's gonna look like in my own work and in the work of others.
Thank you. We're going to talk a little bit more about some of your pieces. And I just want to remind our viewers who are watching, if you've got questions that you want to ask of Karen, pop them into our chat function, and I'll go ahead and read them out loud. We are going to have all of our guests stay on mute through our talk, but if you do have questions you want Karen to answer, please pop them into the chat, and I'll go ahead and read them in just a couple minutes. So moving on to another one of your incredible pieces, you recently participated in a group show, Art of the African Diaspora. Can you talk about your piece, Sacred Adornment, that was part of that show and your process and approach for making it?
So the entire title is Mamjara, a sacred adornment. Mamjara is the name. And the process of making this piece, it was really long. But I just, without sounding California woo-woo, it just sort of came to me one day as I was thinking about like what I wanted to create. I knew I wanted to create something that could be worn in sacred ritual. And so, I sketched out a piece, and then it got bigger, and then it got longer, and then it got bigger, then it got longer. And, it's sacred in many ways, because I think about it as something that can be worn for ritual. But for instance, it has 108 little circles that are all, individually textured. And the number 108 is really important in a lot of spiritual practices and religious practices around the world. And so, for me, it that's a thing that came out. And, without just going on and on and on about it, it started out really small, and then it grew. Sometimes I would wake up and I'd be like, no, that's not right. And then I would go back to it and then add to it. And that's how it got to be the 3-foot behemoth that it is. And, I got such great feedback at the exhibition about it. It is not meant to be worn, but it absolutely is wearable. Whenever I create something like this, because I started by making jewelry and now I've graduated to wearable art, it absolutely can be worn. And, I've had fun with friends who are like, we should send this to Beyonce. She should wear it in a video, to other folks who are like, no, that's a thing that should go on, somebody's office wall. So, that's how it came about. And that's how works come about for me. Like, that's why I'm glad that you asked me about work from the heart versus work from the head. This was absolutely from the heart.
Have you ever been tempted to put the piece on?
I have never. It's funny. I've never been tempted to put it on because it wasn't meant to be worn. It's meant actually to be representative of sacred ritual. I have been tempted to put it up in my house over my altar, but I have never worn it, and I have never even attempted to wear it. In fact, even when I was creating it, I didn't put it on. I used a model, not a person, but I used a kind of model.
I would offer myself, but I think the piece is even taller than I am, so. It definitely belongs on an altar. It is a gorgeous, intensely beautiful piece.
Thank you.
Throughout your work, including in sacred adornment, there is a prevalence of circles, curves, and texture. Can you speak to what these shapes represent for you and what these shapes represent in that piece in particular?
So, I think what I often find myself representing consciously and unconsciously in my work is myriad parts of my own identity. And like, I'm so drawn to circles and curves because it's really an expression of my femaleness and my femininity. And I'm so drawn to texture because for me, that is an expression of culture, of Africanness and rhythm. And so, like, most of the things that you see that are mine have lots and lots of texture, have lots of curves, not a lot of sharp angles, because, I see myself and I see this life as full and round. That's the female in me. I never say never, but expressions of being woman and being African are always going to show up in the work. Yeah.
Could you tell us one more time how large this piece is? It's, you know, we're all looking at it right now on the screen, and of course, it would be very different to see it in person. What was the size of this one more time?
The size of the framed piece is 3 feet wide by 4 feet long. Yeah.
And what are the, it seems like the circles and the moon shape are metal. What is the string made out of?
It's actually not string, it's all metal because I work in all metal. So the actual neck piece is sterling, it's hammered sterling. And all the circles are hammered sterling. And then the hair, if you will, is also sterling, and it's 14 karat gold filled wire.
Gorgeous. I hope that everyone has a chance to see this piece in person very, very soon. Karen, could you tell us what is your favorite art piece you've ever worked on and why?
You know, Alyssa, my favorite art piece is my next art piece. I have to say, when I envision something and I make it and it comes to fruition in a way that is close to what I envision, I love it. And, you know, I'm like, oh my God, this is fabulous. And, but my favorite piece is always the next piece, because I'm always thinking ahead. I'm always looking at the next thing. If I had to choose a favorite, I would say it's the very first thing that I made that I was happy with.
That's the ring with the stone.
That's the stone without the ring.
The stone without the ring, that's right.
Right. And the stone actually is carnelian. And I work a lot with carnelian because carnelian is a stone of courage. And I always feel like I need to have it around me, because I always feel like I need as much courage as I can get to do this work.
You've spoken publicly about the challenges of being a working artist in Oakland and in the Bay Area. How do those challenges influence your art making?
The challenges of being an artist in Oakland influence my art making in a lot of ways, mostly because the cost of living in Oakland is so extraordinary. It's just so high that I feel like I'm in a constant hustle. So often, like, I can't afford metal because I work in precious metal. And I have taken to, and I have, like, recycling metal a lot. So, like, I will upcycle something that might not have sold. Meaning I will melt it again and make it into another piece of sheet and create something else. But, like, the challenge is the cost of living here is the biggest challenge for me and almost every artist that I know. Because unless you are heavily connected, and meaning funded, it's just really hard to pay the rent and to buy materials. And I mean, I appreciate that I have, you know, I'm able to work at the Crucible, for instance. You know, like, being a part of the faculty there gives me, you know, more income. And, you know, California, especially Northern California, we have lots of festivals and events and things like that. But, you know, the cost of living is the most daunting thing about living here. And now, with everything shut down, it's even scarier. It's even scarier.
I think a lot of people are feeling a lot of that fear and scared right now. And we'll talk a little bit later on in our chat about how you've been handling creating in quarantine. Before we get to that, we'd love to start answering some of your audience questions. So if you've got some questions, please drop them into the chat function. I'm going to go ahead and read a couple before we continue on with our talk with Karen. So it's our first moment of audience Q&A, and guests, we welcome you to continue adding questions into the chat function for us to read. So one of our first questions was, how can we see and order some of your work? Natasha, our Director of Marketing and E-commerce, thankfully dropped a link into the chat function if you'd like to see. But Karen, where can we find some of your work and support some of your artistry?
So you can follow me on Instagram and you can see see some of my work. Right now, I am diligently and valiantly trying to get things up on my website because I'm not tech savvy, and that's kind of a drag. But usually, people get to see my work by coming to my shows. And since we don't have shows now, I really have to work on getting things up. That's how I came up on the idea of doing my annual spring show virtually and doing it via lookbook, so that you can go to my website, you can glance at the lookbook, you can see everything. But currently, the best way to see some examples of my work is to follow me on Instagram and check back with me and my website.
Definitely check in on the website so you can sign up for her newsletter, KarenSmithMetalArtist.com. We had another question about sacred adornment. How heavy is the piece?
Because I've never worn it, I could not say how heavy it would be to wear, but it is a pretty substantial piece. It has a lot of metal. I actually have it written down how many grams of silver it is. So if you're interested in actually how many, how much the actual weight is, send me an email and I can get back to you with that. But, I haven't, it's a pretty substantial piece. If you mean how heavy is it to hang on the wall, that's really heavy. Oh, I'm glad somebody asked me that question because I want to give a shout out to David Page, who is also a Crucible faculty member, and he is the one who helped me with the frame. So the frame is handmade and it's solid wood, and so it's a huge piece. So David is actually watching us today, so thank you, David, an incredible woodworking artist in his own right. Yes, absolutely.
Another question from our audience. Since your favorite piece is always the next piece, does that fact mean that you're more emotionally detached from the work, or does that make you more closely attached to all your work?
I would say the latter. In fact, I would say I'm too emotionally attached to my work. But I mean, when people ask me, what's your favorite piece? I'm always kind of shocked by that. It's kind of like asking a parent, who's your favorite child? And so my mother used to say she didn't have a favorite kid. She did, but it was my brother, by the way. But what I know she meant was, that she loved both of us greatly and dearly. And I am, because the majority of what I create comes from my spirit and comes from my heart, I'm attached to all of it. That's a great question.
We are going to start transitioning into one of our very favorite topics, your incredible organization, We Wield the Hammer. And I know that you're repping your brand right now. You're wearing a We Wield the Hammer shirt, which shirts and aprons are available on sale on Karen's website, and they're super duper cute. So definitely go get you one.
Thank you.
For those who don't know, We Wield the Hammer was an organization that Karen founded in 2019 to provide metalsmithing courses for women and girls of African descent. Could you tell us about We Wield the Hammer and why you started the organization?
Absolutely. And thank you. I started the organization because women and girls of African descent around the world are not privy to this art form as vocation or as art form. And for different reasons, gender, class, tradition, for many, 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 many reasons. And when I got the opportunity to have an apprenticeship in Dakar, one of the things that I got really clear about is being the only woman in the area who did that was something that was special for me. But for the women and girls around, it was, really, it was really something else. And there's a little, I always tell the story about how there was a young girl who used to come and watch me every day. And no matter how many times I tried to talk to this kid, she wouldn't talk, she would just stare. And so she, she's a very small child. And now that she got to see a woman with a hammer and a torch creating things, if she wants to learn how to do this work, where's she gonna go? Because in Senegal, I got told that they have a saying, women don't wield a hammer. And in travels that I've had, through the course of my life, I've been in places where women have not had access to art forms or vocations that might otherwise change the trajectory of their lives, like take them out of poverty, be able to feed their children, or even just like feed their creative natures. And so that's how this was born for me. Like I just started thinking, if this child wants to learn how to do this, who's going to teach her? And that's how We Wield the Hammer was born. And I wanted to incubate it here in Oakland because I live here, first of all. But, I'm taking it to Senegal. And as I have talked to people around the country and actually in other countries, I have met women who are saying to me, yeah, this is an opportunity to change lives. Currently, I was in conversation before COVID with a woman who has a school in Ethiopia, a school for girls, actually. And so she was talking to me about bringing it there because in Ethiopia, not only is it not very popular for women to do this work either, but just the nature of making jewelry is seen as a lower form. And so like I'm trying to change access, I'm trying to create opportunity, and I'm trying to make it so that young women and girls who look like me get to do and create and be. And I'm sorry, that's the long answer, but that's where it came from.
It's a beautiful story, and we're so glad that it's part of the Oakland community and the fabric of our community. You just talked about how the inspiration for We Wield the Hammer was the time you spent studying with a master goldsmith in Dakar, Senegal. What does the art of metalworking look like in Dakar? What was it like to be a metalsmith there compared to what it's like, here, compared to what it's like to be a metalsmith in Dakar?
So I would not say I was a metalsmith in Dakar. I would say I was a student. And, so the difference is, so what it's like to be a metalsmith in Dakar. In Dakar, they use many traditional methods So there's not like a lot of electricity. There's not a lot of machinery. You know, it's like a hammer, an anvil, a file, and, you know, a saw, where I was especially. And so the difference is like what I learned was how to do things from scratch. Mm-hmm. And it was hard. Like, it's hard work. You know, if I wanna make something using 24 gauge wire, you know, I have to melt the silver and make a rod and then, you know, hammer it out and then draw it through a draw plate and make it skinny. And like, it's physical labor, you know, because it's not, you know, like, there are not specialized, fancy spaces. And what that actually taught me, besides the fact that I felt like I started to understand how things worked and what I was doing, I started to understand how to do them, is that I feel like I can take my vocation, I can take this art with me anywhere I go. And I'm grateful for my teacher for that, because, for instance, the torch they use is operated with a foot pedal, and sometimes with your mouth. You blow through it to introduce oxygen to make the flame. And I can tell you that that was so hard for me to maneuver. It was worse than when I learned how to drive a manual transmission. Things. And one day, out of frustration, because I was also very afraid, and he was like, you have to stop being afraid. And I was like, why can't you just use like a better torch? Like, my torch is, you know, wonderful. Next time I come, I'm bringing my own torch. And he said, your torch is fancy, but my torch I could take in the middle of the desert and do what I need to do. My torch requires a whole lot of fancy stationary studio space. And, you know, it helped me really understand like the art and the craft of this. It's not about like all the fancy machines. It also helped me settle into being, into not having all the latest tools and all the latest, you know, fancy gadgetry. Like, you know, they create extraordinary beauty out of the bare minimum.
Thank you for sharing that experience. You are a faculty member at the Crucible, as well as an artist all around the world. What has your experience been like as a faculty member in the jewelry department at the Crucible?
So it's been pretty good. I mean, I have colleagues there who I love and learn from. And, you know, my favorite thing besides my own program is there are these special little, and I'm blanking on the term, but they're these special team bills. I love the team bills, which are they're like 2 or 3 hour little tasters where, you know, tech people come, or scientists, or, you know, other groups of people come, and they learn how to play with metal, and they always leave with something. And I thought, I don't know if I want to do this, but it's so interesting with people who are not quote unquote crafty or artsy. You know, people who are scientists come and they think, I want to do this with metal. Is that possible? And so team bills like push for me the limits of what can happen. My favorite story is the young woman who came in and she was like, so I want to make a fortune cookie. And I was like, what? And she's like, yeah, I want to make a fortune cookie out of metal. And, you know, I saw this thing and I have this idea. And they were only there for 3 hours, and she and I created a fortune cookie, and it was friggin' awesome. I even put it up on my Instagram. So like, I love, like, what I love about being there, besides the camaraderie of other arts educators, is engaging with people in these little bursts and seeing where like short bursts of creativity will take them. That is awesome for me.
We certainly do love all of our classes and team build programming, and I think I can speak for probably all of us. I'm itching to get back into the studio, just like all of our faculty and students. We just can't wait to get back in there. And speaking of itching to get back into the studio, now that we are in week 4 of the shelter in place, tell us about your creative process. How has creating during the shelter in place been for you?
It's actually been a challenge. So there's not a lot of creating going on. When I'm working on bigger pieces, I work at the Crucible. Well, the Crucible's closed. And, you know, when I'm working on smaller pieces or when I get inspired, and I get inspired at night, anybody who knows me know they can call me at 2 a.m. and I will be up hammering or soldering or something. But I don't have studio space where I live anymore. And so like the input, I haven't been able to make as much as I would like. And that's been really, really hard. I also, though, haven't had a lot of motivation on my own to work. And what this time has done is helped me to like be bold enough to reach out to other artists and say, hey, I need to talk about art. Hey, I need to talk about inspiration. And right now, actually, I reached out to a local artist who is very famous and who is really fabulous, and told her, you know, I had this dream about your work, and, you know, and I had done these things with you and blah, blah, blah. And I thought we would just have like a funny laugh. And she was like, that sounds dope. We should collaborate. And so like what's come out is I haven't been able to create a lot of things with my hands, but I'm creating a lot of things. I always have a sketchbook near me. Like I'm always writing ideas. I'm always thinking about things and talking to people about how when this is over, like where the work is going and how to make it happen.
This is my favorite question because we debate it every time. My group of fantastic colleagues debate this particular question every time it comes up. What suggestions do you have for artists who might be feeling stuck or distracted in their practice?
Man, I think what we have to do is when we are feeling stuck, we just have to feel it. You know, there's a lot of fear and a lot of emotional stuff happening in the lives of artists right now. Like, I mean, obviously I can't speak for all artists, but, you know, my friends and I talk about like how we're going to get through this, just like how we're going to stay sheltered. Like I have artist friends who are like, you know, I don't know how I'm going to be able to eat. And so people are not necessarily thinking about making art. Besides the fact that, you know, if there's a choice between paying the rent and knowing that you have a place to live and buying materials so that you can make art, I think most of us are choosing to stay sheltered or to eat. And, you know, there are all these memes going around talking about how this is a staycation and, you know, make the best of it. And you should come out of this with a book or, you know, a new play or, you know, a giant sculpture. And I call BS on that. Like, you know, this is an unprecedented time in our lives. And if you can't make, you can't make. So my thing is to hold all of it. Like what I tell all my artist friends is hold all your fear, hold all your anxiety, hold all your stuckness, because that's where it's stuck. Hold all of that with tenderness and grace. And if you got to sit on the couch and binge watch like nostalgia TV. Like I've done that. Like I have binge watched Frasier, and then I was able to do something else. You know, if you can do that, do that. But be as kind and compassionate to yourself as you can, because there's not enough kindness and compassion happening right now.
Amen. We are going to go back to some of our audience questions, and they've been bubbling up. So thank you, friends, for adding some questions to the hopper for us. I'm going to start with, your textures are amazing. So a compliment will always get your question read first.
Thank you.
So your textures are amazing. Do you use anything around to create them, or do you utilize specific tools?
Most of my textures are created with hammers, different hammers. I love hammers, as you can see. I love hammers. And once I learned how they make texture, that became my favorite way to do it. So I use different textures. I mean, I also use burrs. I use, other kinds of things. This piece that I'm wearing, I don't know if you can see it, but that has a kind of texture that I use with a rolling mill. One of the pieces that I'm misusing because it's locked up at the crucible. But like
we're all locked out of the crucible.
Exactly. But yeah, so I use all kinds of things, but mostly hammers.
Cool. Another question. I love how your work has ties to African culture, but also has a nod to modernity. The pieces seem to tell a story as well as decorate. Is that your intention when you create for your customer?
That's my intention, but I have to say that it's about, for me, just expression. It's not for the customer. I'm so happy. Thank you for that question, because I'm glad that that's what people are getting, which means that I'm transmitting it. I'm actually transmitting what I want to. So thank you for recognizing that, for seeing it.
How did you happen to live in Senegal? What brought you there in the first place?
So I literally woke up one morning and heard, you need to go to Senegal. And, I'm at the age where something tells me something, I just listen. So I go, okay. So that same day, I got my first commission for gold wedding bands. And they came over and they dropped off the deposit. And when I went to bed that night, and I said yes, because I love. And, I always enjoy making wedding rings, and it's my favorite commission. And even though I had never worked with gold before, I said yes. And then, I went to bed that night and I was like, oh my God, I have to practice this. And that same voice said, you're going to Senegal to learn how to work with gold. So the next day I just got up and I started looking around for schools and what have you. And I couldn't find any. And so I reached out to a friend who reached out to some friends. And within 24 hours, I have found someone who was willing to train me. I have found a place to live, and I had found expatriates who speak English.
Wow. The power of the community around us, right?
Absolutely. And the power of listening to spirit. Because when something tells you something, listen.
Do you have any tips on going abroad as a work study when developing your art? What worked for you, and what would you have done differently?
So don't pay attention to me, because for me, I don't have children, and I'm also sort of a free spirit. So I just decided I was going to go, and I did it. I saved some money, I raised some money, and then I just went. What I would do differently. So, and when I went the second time, I did exactly the same thing. What I would do differently and what I plan to do differently is to be able to have some sort of income while I'm there, so that when I come back, I'm not just stuck. Because when I went, things were still accruing here, but I wasn't creating any kind of income at all. I was just studying. And so you have to pay attention to the back end in really, really real ways. And you have to have a plan B and a plan C.
I'm going to ask just one more audience question because we're coming towards the end of our hour together. I know. How much is metal smithing by scratch part of your curriculum for We Wield the Hammer? What challenges did you experience in Dakar that you bring back to your students?
So metal smithing from scratch. So with We Wield the Hammer, the thing that I do is introduce them to the skills. It is very, very important to me that they understand when they are done with a session, they understand how to use a saw, how to use a hammer, how to file, how to finish, what different metals, what the different metals that we work with, how they work. I'm much more interested in them understanding and learning these skills than I am of them producing specific art. That said, we do produce things, but We Wield the Hammer is about building fundamental skills and then preparing them to go to the next phase if they so choose. It's not about and we don't do it from scratch because some of those lessons you have to have a basic understanding of smithing. And so I don't teach them, for instance, how to use a crucible, which is where you build the metal. I don't teach them that. That's after they have gotten the fundamentals and they understand what it means to smith. And if they want to go further, then they learn those kinds of things.
Thank you for sharing that. Karen is an incredible teacher and artist. You can follow her on Instagram, Karen_Smith Metal Artist. That's Karen_Smith Metal Artist on Instagram. You can also check out her website, KarenSmithMetalArtist.com, and sign up for her newsletter, which is an excellent way of seeing all the different things that Karen has coming up. And check out some of her artwork that you could potentially invest in yourself and have some wearable art too. He makes gorgeous pieces. We were seeing in the chat a little bit earlier, some people actually do have some of your pieces and they're go-tos. And so you've got some big fans watching you today. So definitely follow Karen. And when we're back open, I hope that you have an opportunity to take a class with Karen as well. To start closing up our talk today, we'll stay online if you want to send some more chats through to us. So even as 4 o'clock rolls around, we'll stay here for you all. So thank you to Karen, and thank you everyone who joined us for this week's virtual artist talks. I want to give a few shout outs for those who helped to make this program possible. A big thank you to our executive director, Susan Murnett, who's been an incredible leader for the Crucible as we navigate these waters. I'd also like to thank our dynamic marketing duo, Natasha Von Cannell, our director of marketing and e-commerce, and Kathy Nyland, our marketing associate, who are helping to make sure that these artist talks are available for all who would like to participate, and they help me look nice. Thank you. A big thanks as well to our CFO, Renee Ventimiglia, and Director of Operations and Facilities, Kua Patton, who are battening down the patches? I started that and didn't quite know where to finish. But they're helping us, and they're going to make sure that once we are able to resume operations, that we can get right back up and rolling and welcoming students back through our doors. A big thank you as well to our entire staff and faculty at the Crucible. We could not do what we do without our faculty and our students and our staff, and they are absolute gems. So a big thank you to everyone. Next week, we are so excited to feature ceramics artist Rosa Durantes, who is going to be our next virtual artist talk feature. So tune in next Friday, April 17th, where we'll be featuring Rosa Durantes. And don't forget, we have a matching campaign happening right now all the way through May 8th. So if you visit our website, thecrucible.org, every dollar that's donated is doubled by an incredible anonymous donor. So please check out our website as well, thecrucible.org, and help support our amazing community. We couldn't do it without you, and we are very grateful to our donor who's helping to match every dollar that's donated up to $50,000 all the way through May 8th. As you know, the Crucible is currently closed. We are going to get through this challenging time, and we are asking our community to support us. So check out thecrucible.org, and we hope that you'll be able to join us as a donor, as a member, as a class taker, or just as someone who helps like us on social media and spread the word to all your friends. We are very excited to have our next artist talk with Rosa next week. And so at this point, we're going to say thank you to everyone who's joined us. We're going to stay here online, so if you've got some extra questions, you can pop them into the chat box, and I'll try to answer them, or maybe Karen will answer them as well. But this will conclude our official virtual artist talk with Karen Smith, and we hope that you will tune in next week when we join you again on Friday, April 17th at 3 o'clock with Rosa Durantes. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.